Welcome to The Critique. Today, we're looking at a Wikipedia article on Charlie Kirk, his activism, Turning Point USA, his media presence, and his recent death.
Yes, a very comprehensive piece.
Definitely comprehensive. We're here to pinpoint a few areas where this already strong material could perhaps be even more effective for readers.
Sounds good.
Okay, so first off, a really big theme here is, naturally, the extensive coverage of Kirk's controversial statements and actions. It's all laid out.
Very detailed.
But presenting that much controversial stuff neutrally, what's the challenge there, specifically in an encyclopedic format like Wikipedia?
Right, that's a key question. The volume isn't the problem per se. It's more about how it's framed. The article is often well-sourced, yeah, but sometimes you see these evaluative words like falsehoods or maybe conspiracy theories presented almost as objective facts right in the narrative.
Okay, so you're saying the weakness is that the article's own voice seems to be making the judgment call instead of attributing it?
Exactly, precisely. It's a subtle thing, but, for that neutral point of view Wikipedia strive for, it matters. When those strong labels aren't clearly tied to the specific critic or the fact checker or whoever made the assessment, well, it can subtly nudge the tone away from strict neutrality. The reader might think Wikipedia itself is labeling it, rather than reporting that, say, the ADL labeled it.
I see. So it's not about hiding the controversy, but clarifying who labeled it as such. Okay, so how do we suggest the writer tackles this systematically without making it sound clunky?
Well, my suggestion is pretty straightforward. Go through those sections systematically and just make sure any strong judgment words are directly and clearly attributed. It just helps the reader understand whose assessment they're reading. It actually reinforces impartiality, I think. Gives it more rigor.
That makes sense. But does adding "according to so-and-so" everywhere risk making it, feel less direct or just longer?
That's a fair point. It's always a bit of a balancing act, but I'd argue the authority here comes from the source being cited, not just the encyclopedia's voice making the call. And yeah, it might add a few words here and there, but the payoff in neutrality and reader trust, I think it's worth it. It's about transparency, really, how we know something is considered a falsehood. Let me give you a couple of concrete examples. So instead of just saying, Kirk promoted the anti-Semitic cultural Marxism conspiracy theory.
Right.
You could tweak it to something like, according to the Anti-Defamation League, or maybe, according to academic experts cited here, Kirk promoted what they described as the anti-Semitic cultural Marxism conspiracy theory. See, it's clear who's making that call.
Okay, yeah, that's much clearer attribution. And what about things like misinformation claims? Same idea?
Pretty much the same principle. So instead of a broad statement like, Kirk spread falsehoods about voter fraud, you could be more specific. Fact checkers, including PolitiFact and factcheck.org, identified Kirk as having spread falsehoods regarding voter fraud and the COVID-19 pandemic. It makes it absolutely clear who determined it was a falsehood, and, it gives the reader a clear trail if they want to check those sources themselves. Builds trust.
Right, so the core principle is externalizing the judgment, frame it as reporting on the critique, not making the critique itself. Yeah, that really shores up the neutrality.
Exactly. It keeps that objective, almost journalistic voice consistent even when the topic is really heated.
Okay, sticking with this idea of managing all this complex info. Another thing I noticed was how the article lists out, really meticulously, a huge number of specific controversies. Very thorough. But I wonder, could that sheer volume, maybe presented chronologically or just as a list, end up feeling a bit fragmented for the reader?
You've hit on another really important structural point. Yeah, the sheer number of detailed incidents, especially in sections like promotion of falsehoods or social policy, it does risk overwhelming the reader. The weakness isn't the detail itself. That's often good. But it can feel like, just one thing after another. A long list.
Like a list of grievances?
Sort of, yeah. It makes it harder for the reader to see the bigger patterns, or the general nature of the criticisms. They might just see individual trees, not the forest, so to speak, like getting lost in the weeds.
That's a good way to put it. So the goal is to help the reader grasp the overarching themes without losing the crucial factual details. How can the writer structure it better?
So, my suggestion here is about thematic grouping. Maybe group related controversies under clearer, broader headings. You could start major sections with a little introductory summary paragraph, something that flags the general type and maybe frequency of these issues. Then follow up with a few really good representative examples, rather than trying to list every single instance.
Okay.
That way, you keep the accuracy but really boost the clarity and, frankly, the readability. It gives the reader a mental map.
Less of a data dump, more of a guided tour? Can you walk me through how that might look for, say, the falsehoods section?
Sure. Let's take that promotion of falsehoods and conspiracy theories section. Right now, it might have subsections like COVID-19 misinformation, election fraud claims.
Right, separate buckets.
Which is fine, but maybe a bit choppy. Instead, consider a broader section title. Something like maybe just disinformation and conspiracy theory promotion.
Okay, a bigger umbrella. And then inside that,
you could start with a short paragraph summarizing his general pattern in these areas. Maybe mentioning his use of TPUSA platforms for claims challenged by fact-checkers, that sort of context. And then, instead of listing every single claim that was debunked, pick a few really strong illustrative examples.
like,
Maybe his early hydroxychloroquine comments as a key example for COVID, or that 80+ buses tweet for the election fraud stuff. The point isn't to hide the other examples, but to use these key ones to characterize the broader pattern. It avoids that feeling of an endless list.
Right. Showcase the typical examples rather than exhausting the reader. What about that social policy section? It also lists quite a few distinct points. Abortion, gun rights, race.
Yeah, similar idea could work wonders there too. You've got abortion, gun rights, race, LGBT, Islam, all important. But you could introduce them with a unifying paragraph first, something that sets up his overall social conservative framework. Maybe talks about his alignment with the religious right, then detail the specific stances.
Context first.
Exactly. Then, for each policy area, again, use a couple of strong representative examples or quotes. The reader gets the gist of his positions and the underlying philosophy without drowning in every single detail. It connects the dots for them.
So basically, provide a thematic roadmap. Makes it easier to see the landscape of his views and controversies, not just isolated incidents.
Precisely. Helps the reader synthesize the information.
Okay, moving on. The article touches on something really interesting. Kirk's ideological evolution. Specifically, that shift from maybe more secular roots towards Christian nationalism. That feels pretty central to understanding his later work.
Definitely significant.
How important is it that the article doesn't just mention this shift, but really shows how it influenced his later actions, his organizations?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. The article does state the shift happened, which is good, but the weakness, I think, is that it often presents it more like a news bulletin, this happened, rather than weaving it deeply into the story of his later politics and activism. It can leave the reader feeling a bit disconnected, like, okay, his beliefs changed, but how did that drive what he did next? What was the why behind starting certain groups or taking certain stances? It's like knowing a character had a change of heart, but not seeing them act differently.
Right, it's about showing the cause and effect. How did this internal shift power his external actions? How can the writer weave that in more naturally, more explicitly?
Well, the suggestion is exactly that. Weave it in more explicitly. Show how this ideological change became maybe the driving force later on. It gives a much more cohesive understanding of his motivations, the philosophy behind specific campaigns or organizations he launched. It provides that crucial lens for the reader.
Can you give some specific examples? How do you integrate that without making it sound like, opinion analysis instead of an encyclopedia entry?
Yeah, good question. It's about connecting the dots, using the available sources. For example, when discussing Turning Point Faith. Don't just say it was founded. Explicitly link it to his stated shift towards Christian nationalism. You could maybe include his quote about it addressing America's crumbling religious foundation. That directly connects his belief to the action.
Okay, that's a clear link. What about his specific stances on social issues later on?
Same idea. When you detail his views on what he called sexual anarchy or abortion or LGBTQ issues, highlight how these positions aligned with or were maybe amplified by his adopted Christian nationalist framework. You could use phrasing that links his stated beliefs to these stances, like referencing his use of Leviticus 20.13 in that context, for instance. It shows the ideological source for the policy view.
And his comments on historical figures or civil rights?
Absolutely. When the article mentions his criticism of someone like Martin Luther King Jr. or the Civil Rights Act, actively connect that back to his promotion of a Christian state, or his Caldwellian view.
Maybe take a second to explain Caldwellian view for folks who might not know that term offhand.
Oh, sure. Good point. So, the Caldwellian view, generally, it refers to an interpretation, often linked with Pastor Stephen Caldwell, that frames American identity and law through a specific lens of a covenant with God, emphasizing certain biblical principles as foundational for the nation. It often involves a particular reading of history that underscores a Christian basis for America, sometimes, potentially downplaying or excluding other influences. So by explicitly drawing that line for the reader, showing how this specific worldview informed his critiques of MLK or civil rights legislation, you give much deeper insight into why he might have held those views. It explains the motivation.
Okay, so it's about tracing that ideological thread, showing how it manifested in his public statements and political projects. That would definitely make the narrative richer, more cohesive.
Exactly. A more complete picture.
All right, finally, let's touch on the section about his death and the reactions, especially with that heavily edited banner right at the top of the article.
Right, the banner signaling things are in flux.
Exactly. It flags that things are changing rapidly. But then the reaction section lists quite a few immediate responses. Is there maybe a slight tension there between the warning banner and presenting those immediate reactions?
You've definitely spotted a common issue with encyclopedia articles covering very recent major news. The weakness isn't that they included the banner, that's correct procedure. It's that the death section itself, and especially the reactions part, goes into detail on a lot of immediate responses, almost as if they're established history. Mentioning a suspect being taken into custody and then released, for example, that perfectly illustrates how fluid the facts are right after something like this happens. So, yeah, there's a subtle tension between the article saying, be careful, this is changing, and then listing things that are changing as if they're fixed.
Okay, so the article acknowledges the instability, but then kind of presents some of that unstable info anyway. It's a tough spot. What's the best practice for an encyclopedia in that situation, when the dust hasn't settled?
Well, my suggestion leans towards caution for an encyclopedia. In the immediate aftermath of a rapidly unfolding event like this, prioritize the confirmed, stable facts. Official statements are usually safer ground. It should probably explicitly state that early reactions are dynamic, subject to change. Maybe even hold off on a super comprehensive list of all the public reactions until things are clearer and more verified. Or, if you do include a list of early reactions, preface it clearly. A note saying this is preliminary, based on initial reports. Something like that. Managing reader expectations.
That sounds very sensible. Prioritize accuracy and stability over capturing every single immediate tweet, essentially. How would that look in practice in the death section?
Okay. Concretely, in the main death section, after stating the fact of his death, you could add a sentence explicitly noting that details are still emerging, especially about the investigation, the perpetrator, motives. You could directly mention the FBI saying the investigation is in its early stages. Highlighting that initial suspect report and release also reinforces this fluidity for the reader. It shows the process.
Okay. And for the reactions part specifically?
For reactions, maybe instead of a really long list of every single person who commented, right away, celebrities, influencers, which can change fast or be based on incomplete info, focus initially on key official statements, like President Trump ordering flags half-staff. That's a verifiable official act. You could also mention general types of reactions, like widespread condemnations of political violence, because that's a stable theme. Then, as a clearer picture emerges, maybe a few days or a week later, you can add the more comprehensive list of tributes and diverse reactions, once things are more confirmed and settled. It ensures the encyclopedia entry remains robust and factually sound.
That makes a lot of sense.
Respect the news cycle, but uphold the encyclopedia's standard for verified, stable information.
Exactly. It's about responsible reporting, especially when things are so raw and fast-moving.
Okay, so just to quickly recap, we've touched on a few key areas for refinement in this Charlie Kirk article. First, reinforcing that neutral voice by being really explicit about who was making critical claims or labeling things controversial.
Attribution.
Second, looking at the structure, maybe grouping controversies thematically to give readers a clearer overview rather than just a long list.
Better flow, yeah.
Third, weaving his ideological shift, especially towards Christian nationalism, more deeply into the narrative to explain his later actions and motivations.
Connecting the dots there.
And finally, managing the information around his very recent death, carefully prioritizing confirmed facts and official statements initially, and acknowledging the fluid nature of breaking news in the reaction section.
Handling recent events responsibly.
Right. We really think focusing on these points can take what's already a very informative piece and make it even more robust, balanced, and ultimately more impactful for readers trying to understand Charlie Kirk.
Agreed. These are ways to enhance an already strong foundation.
We genuinely love to see how you might incorporate some of these ideas. Please do feel free to submit an updated version for another round of critique.